I'm Kate. I work on the equity side of Pledge Me, and I have been in sort of the venture capital and angel investment space for quite a number of years, but decided to make the shift into crowdfunding as I find it more of an accessible platform for both investors and companies, and you're able to target a lot more people. So yeah, I find it a really nice space to be playing in, and we're seeing a lot of interest coming into this space. So basically what we do at Pledge Me is we're a licensed platform or intermediary to help companies get funding from the public, essentially. And we have a couple of different streams that we do this through, but we basically say our core mission is to help people fund the things that they care about. And this tends to be with companies that are social enterprise or have some kind of social impact or environmental impact, but is not necessarily. It could just be companies looking to get funding from their local community or family and friends. So yeah, there's a whole variety, but it does tend to play in that social enterprise space. So we started up in 2012. We were one of the first platforms in New Zealand to offer crowdfunding, and we are now the first equity crowdfunding platform. So we didn't start the equity crowdfunding side of things until about 2014, when the laws really allowed for this to come in. So it is quite a new type of funding avenue, but it is becoming more and more popular, and we're starting to see the traction build every year in interest from both companies and investors. So it's a really exciting space to be in. And in 2017, we actually moved it into Australia as well. So we've got a lot of networks starting to spread out. And yeah, since then we've had nearly 1,600 campaigns and nearly 62 million come through the platform from the general public, which yeah, we feel is a pretty awesome milestone. Yeah, so interestingly, 56% of the companies that come through are social enterprise, 57% female founded, which I think you'll find is quite different to the traditional models for equity funding, such as angel and venture capital. We have 5% Indigenous-led businesses across Australia and New Zealand, and 44% in the rural regions. So yeah, quite a diverse bunch and very different, again, to what you would see normally in this equity space. So in terms of what crowdfunding is, so we offer 3 different platforms, and I'm only really going to touch on the first 2, which is project and equity. So project crowdfunding is you are asking for funding from a crowd in exchange for some kind of reward. That reward can be anything from a shout out on social media to some kind of corporate package or big community package. So yeah, it really depends, and it's really important, sort of as Bronwyn was talking about, to know your funder in terms of what you're offering and what they might be interested in getting in return for their funds. And then equity is kind of the big boy, and that is you're giving away equity in your company in exchange for funding. So that one's a lot more stringent. There's a lot more rules that we have to adhere to and help companies adhere to. So that definitely requires a lot more attention and time. And then we have our lend, which is people giving money on a loan basis. And that is probably less popular, and the rules around lend are becoming more and more strict. So we're not seeing such an appetite for that one. Hence the reason I'm just focusing in on project and equity. So project crowdfunding, as I mentioned, is a way to get money in exchange for a reward. And we see that this is generally between 5,000 and 70,000 in terms of what a company's looking for. But actually the barrier to entry is almost zero. You can set up a campaign. It doesn't cost anything to do that, and you can put it through the website and raise $100 if you wanted to. But if you're heading towards those larger amounts, then you've really got to start to put time and energy into the planning process. And that is the most important thing, is actually the lead up to a campaign and getting funding rather than when it's actually live. Crowdfunding is all about activating people that are interested in joining you on your journey. So that might be family and friends, it might be people in your immediate kind of community or area, or just people that generally align with what you're trying to do. So first and foremost, it's important to know who these people are, what they stand for, and then how much they might be willing to give you in order to support the business or the cause. And so being able to understand who they are will then help you to put together a really solid communications plan, which is important in the lead up to a launch. So we always say you essentially want to go into the day that you launch a campaign with hundreds of people ready to go and put their money into your company already. So 6 to 8 weeks out, really making sure that you're engaging with those people, whether that's conversations in person, through social media, through newsletters, getting radio slots, TV slots, whatever it is that you can do to get your project out there in front of people and get it in front of the right people. So rewards, yeah, they can range from anything. I mean, we see people do shout outs on social media for $5. We see people give 12-month memberships for, say, the 500 mark, and you can tier what kind of rewards you're giving. But it again depends on who your crowd is and what they're looking for. And it's sort of investors are there because they're definitely interested and they want to align with your journey, but they're also looking for something in return for their generosity, and sort of a 50-50, you know, they want to be generous, but they'd also like to get something out of it. And the really nice thing about project crowdfunding is that there's no strict rules or guidelines. You can say pretty much whatever you want as long as it's not kind of R18 content, but you decide what goes in there and you decide how you portray that to your crowd. The key things for a really successful campaign, aside from a communications plan, are really making sure that you let your crowd know what the money is going to be spent on, and if you can itemize that as clearly as possible, that's really important. And also, the more visual content you can have, like videos, any imagery, that's what people are drawn to. They're less likely to read pages and pages of information. They just want to see a quick video, 2 to 3 minutes, and then they might read the first 2 paragraphs. So you've really got to grab people with that visual content. So we sort of have some general guidelines around when it's good to use a project campaign versus an equity campaign. So best suited to people that want to raise less than 100,000. We have had a few project campaigns that sort of are up to that $300,000 mark, but at that point you're looking at kind of a corporate style communication strategy, probably spending a lot of money upfront to try and raise that. So there is a cost involved with raising more money, and you just have to be a bit conscious of that. If you don't want to give away equity, so it really suits pre-revenue companies, startups that are, you know, strapped for cash, don't have a high valuation behind them at the time, and you're not ready to give away shares in your company yet. So it can really suit companies at that very early stage, and it can also be a great way to generate awareness and pre-sales. So yeah, really good at the starting point. And for companies wanting to test an idea and get feedback as well. So we find that quite a few companies actually start with a project campaign, generate a crowd, generate awareness, and then come and raise a larger amount through equity later on. So a couple of examples of really good ones that we've had recently. So Water Us was a young founder called Lila, who was 9 years old at the time, and she was selling this artistic toilet paper in exchange for people putting funds into helping her get fountains in parks across Auckland. So they had a really, really strong social media campaign. Lila got some slots on TV, radio. They probably spent 2 months leading up to the launch of their campaign through Pledge Me, just reaching out to people, getting the word out. And then once it was live, they kept it live for a month. And really, again, just engaged every day with people to make sure that they knew about this opportunity. And they came up with really creative little slogans like "Wipe for Water." So yeah, the more creative you can be, the better when it comes to project crowdfunding. Also equity, but it's a little more stringent. So you probably couldn't get away with things like "Wipe for Water" on the equity side. And we've had another one recently called The Well. So this is from a group called Coliberate down in Wellington, and they were building New Zealand's very first holistic kind of well-being gym. And they managed to raise 60,000 through the project crowdfunding side of things. And they really, they hammered home on social media things like they did lots of Facebook Q&As, they did lots of radio slots. They really knew their crowd and they targeted them personally, going and talking to them, doing letter drops. And they also had some ambassadors, so some ex-All Blacks, some Silver Ferns that were able to put through their social media some information about the WELS campaign. So yeah, being as creative as you can with getting the word out is really important, and making sure that you're using strategies that target the people that you actually want to align your campaign with. So that's project. And then equity is, yeah, it's a lot more complex. There's a lot more involved, but it is potential to raise a lot more money. So as I said, pledges are giving money in direct exchange for shares. Sometimes there might be some kind of reward involved as well, but generally what they're looking for is a stake in your company. So the minimum that we say companies raise through this platform is 100,000, just because it is so time intensive to prepare for a campaign like this. Your documents need to be so precise in terms of not being false and misleading, and meeting all the Financial Market Act guidelines. So that's why we say companies raise 100 plus, because the time and money investment upfront is actually quite significant. And then 2 million is the cap that companies are allowed to raise from a what we call retail investment crowd. So that's anybody in the public who's not kind of a professional investor. So that's the cap on what you can raise every 12 months from that retail crowd. And as I said, it needs to be really compliant. But the real benefit about raising capital through a crowdfunding platform and not through like an angel or a VC is it's actually all on your terms. So you decide the valuation, you decide how much you want to give away. As long as you can justify that, then the crowd decides whether or not they're interested in investing. So it is kind of a beautiful way to raise money and generate that awareness at the same time. Yeah, so as I've mentioned, there's that $2 million cap. Individual investors can invest up to 2 million. So we do see the average investment in an equity crowdfunding is about 2,000, but it really depends on the type of campaign that you've got. Some who are just looking to go to the local community and really just get that buy-in from people around them may set the minimum investment at $100. Companies that are more focused on investors kind of as partners, or in that higher end bracket, might be looking at a minimum of 2,000 to 5,000. So it's really dependent, and again, really important to know your crowd first. That is, if there's one thing I can hammer home, the most important thing about crowdfunding is understanding who your funder is, just like Bronwyn was saying. And I think you'll find across all funding types, you have to know your funder to be able to get funds from them. And so, yeah, the key thing about going through something like Pledge Me or any crowdfunding platform is that we're licensed to be able to put an equity offer out to the public. So you can't just go and get money from people in exchange for shares. It has to be done in a proper way through a licensed platform to make sure that everything is legally sound. So that's kind of why we're in the middle, to help be that neutral party and make sure that every box is ticked. So yeah, it's really democratizing who can invest. Traditionally in startup companies with angel and VC investment, it's quite difficult to, unless you're a professional investor, people can't really put money into your company. So it really opens it up to everybody. It opens it up to your parents, friends, people, neighbors. Anybody can invest in an equity crowdfunding campaign. And it's just really about finding those people that align with you. So we do have opportunities to bring on what we call the wholesale investors, or our sophisticated investors, through the platform. And this is really to extend that $2 million cap. So if you are looking for more than $2 million, there's an opportunity to go out to professional investors as well. But this is quite a complex realm to get into. And yeah, it's a lot more effort to be doing a campaign which does both retail and wholesale investment. So yeah, the real benefits for doing an equity crowdfunding campaign is obviously gives you money to grow, but you'll need to be really, really clear about how that money is going to be spent and in what time frame. And that is really itemizing, what is your team getting? What are you spending on sales and marketing? What are you spending on equipment, manufacturing? All of these things need to be tabled out really carefully, and also looking at your financial forecasts. So you'll need to be planning ahead 2, 3, 4 years even with your financial forecasts and presenting this to your crowd. So transparency is really key, and planning, you're probably looking at 12 months of planning prior to one of these launches in terms of getting together your documents and information, and then also going out to the crowd and really engaging with them prior to launch. So it's definitely a lot of work, but can be really, really worth it in the end if you're willing to put in that time. And as I've said, it really is an opportunity to increase awareness, and then making sure that you're using really strong marketing and comms strategies. We often find that newsletters are a fantastic way to get messaging out. And again, visual content, social media, traditional forms of marketing and comms can work as well, but we find that the newsletter is really a key driver for equity campaigns. And yeah, as I've mentioned, it's really like, be prepared to put in the time and work. These documents that are needed to be put together is what we call an investment memorandum, is about 40 pages long. You have to be really transparent with everything and take extreme care not to be false or misleading. So it is, it takes a long time to put together and review. So just make sure you give yourself ample time to be able to do these things. And then just taking into consideration what kind of shares you're wanting to be, wanting to give away, whether they're voting shares, whether you want people having control over your company, what you want your capitalization table to be looking like. So you've got to take into account all of these things before you even get into a raise. So there's a lot to be thinking about. Yeah, so a couple of advantages, which I've already touched on, but shareholders can often bring more than just money. They can be brand ambassadors. They can also be what we call smart money. So bring in experience, networks that can help you to grow your business. It drives awareness. We get a lot of publicity around our campaigns and through the media. So yeah, it definitely drives a lot of awareness about your products. And then it can also be a real advantage in terms of sales. So if you are thinking about a crowdfunding campaign, think about maybe what else you could offer investors to entice them to be buying your products or services. So in terms of who makes up the crowd, we get this question a lot. And I think the key thing is that Pledge Me or a crowdfunding platform doesn't have the investor crowd exclusively. It's really about activating the crowd that aligns with you. So yes, we have a database of people, about 30,000 on our newsletter, but it's really there to supplement the people that want to invest in your company specifically. So it's about finding who those people are. Start with family and friends. Could be your electrician, your plumber, it could be your neighbors, it could be existing customers. It's really about thinking creatively as to who those people might be, and just starting small and expanding the list as you go. And that's why that piece about the communication strategy leading up to it is really, really important, to figure out who these people might be. So a really nice example of a successful equity campaign that we've had is Hunt and Gather Bee Co. So they actually did a project campaign with us in 2018 for about $16,000, and then came back to us end of last year for a campaign for $350 through the equity side. So they'd already gathered their crowd, really engaged with them, and had, you know, a lot of people already interested before they wanted to go to launch. One thing that they did really, really well is that they put up a link on their website and asked for expressions of interest prior to their launch. And so they got basically their full subscription of $350 in interest before they'd even launched their campaign. So there's some really creative ways that you can kind of gather that interest and information about who's interested and how much they might be willing to put in. And it's really, yeah, it's about considering how you might tap into those people prior to even launching your campaign. And then another really nice one was Ethique, which a lot of you might know. So they came to us multiple times and have raised, nearly $700,000 through the Pledge Me platform, reaching, with their second one, reached nearly the $500,000 mark in 90 minutes. And again, that was just a really, really strong communication strategy that went into that. They had people that were already interested from previous crowdfunding rounds, and they really went out, you know, again and again through email, through meeting with people, to their crowd, to get that interest leading up to it. And actually some of their investors were customers and also chemists that could really bring a lot of knowledge and expertise to their company. So there's a really nice thing with crowdfunding where you may actually be tapping into networks that could help to grow the business as well. We don't always have social enterprise type businesses. We've had quite a lot of breweries, and I'm sure people know this of crowdfunding platforms, but breweries, medicinal cannabis seems to be quite popular. These probably lean more into the very large campaign, 2 million. Sometimes they're looking at wholesale investment as well. Whereas the social enterprise, kind of family run, community run businesses tend to be raising a little less, sort of in that 500,000 to $1 million range. So again, it's really knowing what you need, what you can do with it, and then what your crowd might be willing to give up to invest in you. So I know it sounds really scary, equity crowdfunding, and there's a lot of guidelines and it's quite stringent, but we actually take all our equity crowdfunding companies through a program to assist with this, because there are a lot of legal requirements. So we make sure that everybody has the information that they need and the templates they need beforehand. So yeah, we're definitely here to support and hold people's hands in the lead up, because it is quite a scary thing.